Do that again. Let me fucking make sure before I present this that all of this stupid information is right. 'Cause I don't want to do that again. Yeah. God, I am so hungry. God, okay. Good morning, Dr. Montana. My name is Nick, and I chose to do my presentation on ocean acidification. Um, Big problem right now, and it kind of takes a backseat to global warming as far as. Fuck! All right. Good morning, Dr. Montana. My name is Nick. I did my presentation on ocean acidification. Kind of a fun one, not as fun as global warming, but ocean acidification, we can get down to some neat, specific things that acidification is. I hate myself. Go. All right. Okay. Uh, Good morning, Dr. Montana. My name is Nick, and I chose to do my presentation on ocean acidification, the acidification of the ocean caused by, of course, anthropogenic carbon emissions skyrocketing after the Industrial Revolution, causing whole lots of unintended consequences and underappreciated consequences. Ocean acidification really takes a backseat to global warming, and it's something that I think people should pay a little more attention to. This first picture right here is a coral reef. This is part of the Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Australia that has been affected by ocean acidification and has expelled all of its photosynthetic symbiotic zooxanthellae. Not good. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, that is a dying coral reef. Not cool. So we're going to do a couple things here in this presentation. I talked about the problem, the ecological impacts, human health and environmental health impacts, some of the economic impacts, and then some possible solutions to ocean acidification. So starting out, anthropogenic carbon emissions have caused an increase in atmospheric carbon by 40% since the start of the Industrial Revolution from about, hold on, I think it's 280 to 420 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That's a lot. 40% is a lot. But one of the things that's kept that from being even higher is our largest carbon sink, the ocean, which sequesters 30% of those carbon emissions. So every time uh, carbon dioxide is expelled through the burning of fossil fuels into the atmosphere, some of it is turned into carbonic acid on the surface of the ocean. It just reacts with water. And in turn, that carbon carbonic acid stays in the ocean and makes the ocean more acidic. So since the Industrial Revolution began, the pH of the ocean has gone from 8.2 to 8.1. That doesn't sound like a lot, but remember pH is measured on a logarithmic scale, so that is actually a 30% increase in acidity. So, yeah, no good, not good. Again, this is just another uh, picture of coral reefs that are being affected by ocean acidification, uh, coral bleaching. So a little bit of the chemistry about it. It's not quite as simple as carbon dioxide just being absorbed and making the ocean more acidic. If we talk about calcifiers, marine calcifiers, they rely on carbonate ions in the ocean. And when carbonic acid interacts with those carbonate ions, um, they form uh, bicarbonate ions. Crabs, oysters, mussels, all that stuff needs carbonate, but ocean acidification and carbonic acid are turning it into bicarbonate, which is not available for mineralization. And we've got this neat little cartoon over here that kind of describes the essence of that problem, which is that crabs can't make shells. Um, there's less carbonate in the ocean for them to make their shells out of, but also the carbonic acid is stripping carbonate away from their shells, dissolving their shells. Um, and that creates all kinds of problems that we'll talk about in a minute here. Uh, and then here's just another little diagram of what's going on. Obviously, atmospheric carbon dioxide is the only real driver of ocean acidification, and then some of the chemistry that's happening caused by excess hydrogen ions in the ocean impacting calcification. So all these are calcifiers. These corals, mollusks, they rely on those carbonate ions. Uh, okay, so now some ecological impacts. Obviously, as we've looked at previously, there's some damage to coral reefs. So reefs are very biodiverse. The habitats that they form, the opportunity for many species of many species of fish, marine invertebrates, sponges, echinoderms, all that kind of stuff. They thrive on reefs. Um, 25% of marine species, a quarter of marine species, and reefs only occupy something like 10% of the benthic ocean floor. Uh, very little of it, but there's a lot of biodiversity. So the thing that gives these coral reefs their color and ability to survive are their symbiotic relationships with holobionts and uh, and microbes. So they give the coral their color, but also provide antimicrobials and nutrients to them. But increasing pH or decreasing pH, increasing acidity alters their gene expression and basically keeps them from reproducing. And the coral eventually just expel all of that zooxanthellae, which makes them turn white. That's called coral bleaching. Um, Without those, they can't really get food. and then they die, which is not cool. Also, corals are made out of calcium carbonate, the mineral that's being turned into bicarbonate by acid. So all around, ocean acidification is very bad for these corals. These are just some more images of coral bleaching. That bright white color is not good. This right here is a reef. I can't zoom in, but these white corals have been bleached, so they have recently expelled their zooxanthellae, and these are dead. So they turn brown, and because this coral is a living thing until yeah, that happens. Real shame. And then all these other species, the echinoderms, the fish, the marine invertebrates, have nowhere to live. They rely on these corals for shelter and food. So it really has a cascading effect on the biodiversity of these reef systems. Um, Calcifers, yep. We were talking about the chemistry of the acid keeping them from producing shells and actually dissolving their shells. It's documented to reduce survivorship in this study by said it's we'll go over some more statistics in a few slides here. But also, a lot of these marine calcifiers and crabs and stuff are used as um, biomarkers, or these keystone species. Basically, what they do is they accumulate cadmium, toxic heavy metal, into their shells as a result of pollution, right? So when there is enough carbonate in the ocean, when the ocean is not too acidic, they're able to build their shells out of carbonate. But when the ocean gets acidic and there's less carbonate, they incorporate more cadmium into their shells, which gives us a good idea of A, how much cadmium pollution we have, but more importantly, B, uh, how much ocean acidification is happening. Um, the amount of cadmium in the shells of these crabs isn't enough to hurt them. Further down the line, as we see bioaccumulation in the trophic levels, eventually, uh, if you're like sensitive to cadmium in your diet, you could experience some. Obviously, no amount of heavy metal in your body is good, but you could experience some complications. But it's not super likely, and not why we focus on cadmium. It's more as an environmental marker. Um, so this is a little study by said again, looking at excuse me, length of crabs exposed to ocean acidification, and then the addition of cadmium in an acidic environment. Uh, the results of the Tukey test in these survival statistics show that um, there's not much of a significant change between cadmium and no cadmium, but there is this slight downward slope as acidification increases in survival. So we're going from 100% survival rate down to about 90 right here. So as ocean acidification increases, survivorship decreases. And the same with length. Growth decreases generally as uh, acidification increases. And then over here, we can see the incorporation of cadmium in the tissues and shells of these crabs um, when cadmium is added. So obviously, more acid, less carbonate ions for them to form their shells out of. more cadmium is incorporated into the shells. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the impacts on human health. One of the big ones is algal blooms. Ocean acidification increasing means that we're seeing more of these algal blooms. Um, the red tides. This is happening in off the west coast of Florida and in the Gulf of Mexico towards Mississippi, both for the reasons of obviously marine eutrophication from the Mississippi River, but also increased acidification right along that west coast of Florida. So these red tides are really bad for people because they're toxic, and if you swim through a red tide, you're swimming through a bunch of toxic shit, and that's yucky. But they're also releasing toxins into the air, decreasing air quality, which causes irritation. Um, Additionally, uh, yeah, this is terrible. Additionally, what's happening to ocean wildlife is that these algal blooms, what they do is they cause uh, what are called dead zones in the ocean. So they basically decrease the oxygen content of the water. Um, yeah, I'm not gonna, yeah, they decrease the oxygen content of the water. They photosynthesize during the day, but not at night. They shade. Benthic photosynthesizers. When they die, they like fall to the bottom of the water and decay. Less oxygen, and that kills all the fish. Like all the fish that are swimming through here, um, if they spend too long in that low oxygen zone, they die, and it's not good. Okay. Also, um, ocean life, coral reefs, we get a whole lot of people medicine from that. Coral reefs have been referred to as the medicine chests of the seas. We get like all sorts of natural health products and prescription drugs, chemotherapy drugs as well from sea sponges from the ocean. It is really not good to be messing with this environment that gives us a drug for a disease that afflicts like 30% of people at some point in their life. Um, Especially since ocean acidification really impacts calcifiers like sponges. There's a little like flow chart here about why ocean acidification is bad for your physical and mental health. It causes market changes, which we'll talk about in a minute, malnutrition, which we'll also talk about, poisoning of seafood with that cadmium, but also accumulation of other toxins like from those red tides, uh, less biodiversity, fewer new medicines, air quality, which is a result of the red tides, respiratory issues. All of it goes together and kind of makes this, oopsie daisy, this whole whirlwind of shit, which is not cool. If we lose the coral reefs that we have now from ocean acidification, we risk not only losing the drugs that we have, but an avenue for discovery of possibly a cancer cure or something. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the economical impacts. Um, Fishing is important. Fishing is whether it's shellfish or regular fish, we our economy, but low income countries' economies especially rely on fishing to sustain a lot of people's lives. Right here is a study that was done by Narita in 2012, looking at the projected impacts of ocean acidification on the mollusk fishing industry. So this is just a little supply and demand curve showing that we are looking at, given the current trends of ocean acidification, we are looking at having a lower quantity of shellfish, and therefore the price is going to increase, and we're losing a lot of money right there. I know this graph is just like that little V, but that could come around to being uh, what's shown in this graph right here is a $6 billion loss in the mollusk industry. And in the future, if trends continue, Narita says it could be a loss of $100 billion in the global economy. I should say this isn't just for the United States. This is for, based on current climatology trends for all of the fishing, mollusk fishing industry as a whole. So these are some more projected impacts. We've got obviously all these calcifiers, mollusks and crustaceans, all shellfish are being impacted, and the loss of these shellfish because they can't produce shells um, could mean losses of, you know, I don't know exactly what units this is in, but pretty enormous net loss um, for every fishing economy. Looking here, England has the highest loss in gross domestic production from shellfish. Um, yeah, looking at obviously huge economic losses. Okay, so now that we've talked about yeah, all the bad things that happen due to ocean acidification, and it's a lot of bad things. Um, it's not it's not over. The fight is not over. There are still some things that can be done. So the most obvious, glaring measure that we as a species can take to reduce ocean acidification, to stop ocean acidification, is to stop as much carbon emission as we can. Stop burning fossil fuels. Um, the catch to that is that it would take the ocean, even if we totally stopped fossil fuel production or fossil fuel combustion, it would take the atmospheric sequestration of all that carbon that's already that 420 or 480 parts per million, whatever it is, in the atmosphere to be sequestered elsewhere, like in forests and trees and stuff like that, 10,000 years before the ocean could um, get rid, uh, start to return some of that uh, carbon back into the atmosphere. That's a really long time, and for isolated communities like coral reefs and places where that biodiversity is really valued and important, 10,000 years is too long to wait. So there's a couple things that we can do in those cases to kind of locally control pH, and one of those is submersible pumps that basically pumps seawater over sodium hydroxide, which is a strong base, removing some of the protons from removing the protons from uh, bicarbonate and turning it back into carbonate, removing all the carbonic acid from the water, as long as you have fresh calcium hydroxide. This has been shown to locally increase pH, aka decrease acidity, right here in this study by Albright. So they put these pumps upstream of some test sites, and it showed that alkalinity increased significantly in the experiment. So, and then the change in net calcification of organisms at that test site also increased by about 7%. So that's significant enough to, really help these coral reef communities. And this has actually been kind of tested, not in the Great Barrier Reef, but in the Reef Triangle. I think it's in the just north of South America in the ocean. But it's been tried and it works. And although it's very expensive, this might be what we have to do to save the coral reefs. Um, Additionally, you could use direct ocean capture to. It's a similar method of increasing pH, kind of like direct air capture. We can capture carbon dioxide from the air and essentially get rid of it, but it's very expensive and it requires a lot of energy. And kind of run into a catch 22 of where does that energy come from? Well, right now it comes from burning fossil fuels, and you don't want to reach around your ass to get to your elbow by getting rid of all the getting rid of all the carbonic acid in the ocean just to put more into the atmosphere that's eventually going to wind up in the ocean. So we're in early stages right now. Obviously, these studies, 2003 and 2023 and 2016, that's less than 10 years of development, really, with these submersible pumps. So I think that there's new stuff definitely on the horizon. It's important that we focus on ways to increase the ocean's pH, especially locally in places like that, where that biodiversity is really valuable, not just for ocean life, but for human life. You know. All right, that's all I got for you. These are my these are my scholarly sources. Oh, shit, I got one more. Yeah. Awesome. Fuck.